Hi, welcome to Pretty Blunt. My name's Jaime Lipowitz. I'm your host today. I'm here with my partner in crime, Sabine Schwirtz. Sabine, what is the High Buds Club hot gossip? Give it to me.
Vapes are the hot gossip right now.
Shock.
I know. Our vapes kind of, to be fair, vapes are kind of the hot gossip a lot, and they have been. I think, did we say last year was the year of the vapes?
Last year was the year of the vapes. Yeah, I can usually tell based on what clients are asking for, right? So like I hear a lot of, oh, we're launching all-in-ones, we're redoing our 510 assortment. Everything now is liquid diamonds. That was distillate. So, like, you sort of start to see the trends just based on what, the cannabis brands are talking to us about. But then bud tenders follow.
I was gonna say what the budtenders are talking about now is still vapes with multiple things. One, there's a chunk of them that still don't personally like all-in-ones slash disposables that like personally just hate the concept of them. And then they're talking a lot about the death of disti, which I just think is going to be the theme this year.
I don't think there's the death of
No,
disty.
I don't think it'll die.
I think disty has a place in the market, and there's people that like it, and like there's a couple disty products I really like, can't lie. So I don't think it's going anywhere per se. I think innovation happens. Rosin becomes the trendy skinny girl margarita of the times. And now diamonds are the hot girl at the party.
Well, I think that's actually such a good point, is it's like the disties aren't gonna die. They have a place in so many spaces and places, and to be fair, I am the consumer, it's me. I will keep distillate and going strong. It's for me. But I think that's what they're saying, and like you calling out diamonds, I think is the budtenders are saying that customers are asking for a different high. Like, and so I think we're seeing the rosin and the live resins because people are like, it's not necessarily about potency, they're just asking for a better high.
Well, that's it, right? Like the effects are slightly different. The come down is slightly different. The longevity is slightly different of all these products. And, I think like in alcohol, if you're chilling and whatever, maybe you're drinking one glass of wine where when you're partying, you're, tequila shots and it's going to be a different experience the next day. So I don't see why weed's any different.
No, I kind of like, I 100% agree with you. Like, is it a commodity, Jamie?
Don't start with me.
But I think like that what we're seeing is really cool is like with people talking about distillate being less popular, I think we're just like seeing bud tenders recognize that customers are asking for something new. Like that's ultimately what we're seeing. And like the customers don't necessarily know what to ask for. Like they don't know how to say, I'm looking for a live resin. Like they don't know that that's what they want. So they don't have those words.
Yeah, somebody once said to me that customers are still learning the language, like they're still learning the ABCs of weed. And I think they don't know why they're asking for something per se, or what, or rather, they do know why they're asking for something. They just don't know what that solution is. And as innovation evolves, right, you try a bunch of things. Like vapes were a non-existent thing, like what, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Like they haven't been around all that long, especially in the cannabis space, right? So as things evolve, consumers get smarter. They understand more. They want, these effects versus these. They want this terpene over this one, like whatever the thing is. Um, and I think it's a good sign of a market evolution, that everything is moving and they're like, what's next? This thing is new. Oh, I didn't like that. And they can tell you why they didn't like that. And I think that that's yeah, it's interesting.
Well, it is interesting. And I think you said something about, I don't remember what you just said, but it was great. You said something that made me think of it, where it's like almost like there is a new consumer. Like there's people, that's what it is people learning what's happening right now. And I actually think that's why I personally believe that all-in-ones are the best, because like it allows it to be an understandable product so that someone can learn about what they like in like a little bit more of an accessible way.
Yeah, I see that. I like the all-in-one for convenience and ease. You don't it's the hardware and software are immediately compatible, right? When you're putting the oil as the software into a cart that then has to be connected to a 510 or whatever. There's a lot of room for user error. And that's just by nature, right? Like temperatures, if the cart isn't connected properly, like there's leaks, there's clogs, like there's all kinds of things that can happen because the two pieces, the hardware and the software, are disconnected from each other. Um, All-in-ones remove that barrier, or that pain point rather, and so when it's sold as, an all-in-one device that doesn't need anything else, it can be recharged, whatever, um, I just lose them, but that's just, like, because I lose everything. I think that's why consumers like them, and so they're trying more things and, they can go back to things, they remember things by name because it was if they had a great user experience, which I believe always translates to brand experience, We're talking to Kate Moody next, and there's a reason Auxly is ruling the all-in-one vape game. Their vape devices are I actually have
Do you
one
have
right
one?
here. I do,
That
because
was
I bought this
unscripted.
that was unscripted. I bought this with my own money. I buy this with my own money. I would just like to tell you that. But I think the reason they're killing it, Collab Project and Back 40 is the distillate all-in-one. That's a very clear consumer. It's designed beautifully. The Collab project is all-in-one is a little bit more elevated. It's got the liquid diamonds in it, but the device itself, like outside of the software component, 14th Round does the hardware on this, and the device is great. It's a great user experience, and so because it's a great user experience, I return to it, and I really like the Pure Diamonds all-in-one because I don't love the flavor agents. I think it tastes like a bong hit, and I'm into that. That wasn't an ad, I swear.
No, I honestly, I think, like, you and I are both pretty heavy vapors, but I think, like, you just said something, and I think that's kind of why this was in my brain, and this is also, I think, why the budtenders are talking about it right now. Like, one of the budtenders said, like, "There's no reason for anyone to buy an all-in-one," and I'm like, I think this is actually the work of the brands to explain why an all-in-one, like, actually makes sense for certain customers at certain times, depending on, like, what's going on. Like, there's actually a ton of reasons why this is a more of like, an easier to use product and a product that just, like, gets people into new formats of cannabis they might not have known about before. Like, again, it's unlikely someone's gonna know what to do with live resin the very first time they try live resin unless it's in a vape.
No, but that's with a lot of concentrates anyway, right? Like, the concentrate game is, um nuanced, right? Like you need a rig, you need all these tools. Like it's a little cracky in some ways when I think about it. This packages it up really nicely and makes it that you can, like go on a walk and take your concentrate with you. And it's easy to use. It's the pre-roll of concentrates. It's the grab and go.
Totally. Actually, that's a good point about it being grab and go too, and I feel like we could circle this drain for 100 years.
We will.
And or we literally will, but, like, truly, like, I think that's actually in my brain, I feel like we just connected the dot, Jamie, where it's like the budtenders are telling us, the hot gossip is they're saying right now, that they're having a lot of conversations about not distillate, and they're having a lot of conversations about all-in-ones versus 510s versus 1.2s, 1.5s. That's like a thing, and we can talk about size differences at a different day, but, like, the budtenders are having this conversation because the customer is starting to learn, and a way they can learn is through vapes because it makes those, like, hard to access things really easy.
Well, it starts the conversation,
Yeah,
right? It takes something that's really intimidating. I'm intimidated by concentrates. I'm totally intimidated by concentrates. It takes that thing that's a little bit intimidating and makes it easy to digest and you understand it. And it's in a format that's easy to use and socially acceptable in a lot of places and spaces. Um, yeah, I like it. I do. I was not a vapor before this industry. But
what was
I
your first vape that made you be like, "Oh, I like this?"
I really liked the back 40 Tiki Tang.
Was it the Tiki Tang that, like, did
It
it
was
for
that
you?
Tiki Tang all in one. Yeah, I don't know what it was about that vape pen, but that when that came out, I guess that would have been, like, end of 2023 probably that launched, like, Q4-ish 2023. I don't know. Someone gave me one, probably Kate, to be honest with you, who we're talking to next. Um, and I just was like, "This device is great. It's just
Had
great,
had
and
you
it's
ever
really cute."
you had never dabbed, though, before?
I have dabbed, like, literally one time, and I got so high that, like, I wandered around downtown Toronto, like, scared to go home. So, like, that was not an awesome entry point into concentrates for me
That's
because I
kinda my
just
point.
don't think that I was expecting sorta like the slap in the face that I got, um, and didn't love that. Didn't I don't like being too much of anything. I don't like being too high, I don't like being too drunk, like any of those things. I don't like being I like shocker, I like being in control. And I felt like that made me feel a little out of control. And so I stayed away from concentrates for a long, long time. Yeah, long, long time. I was not into it. Um, and then, yeah, that all in one, that Tiki Tang became very accessible, is the word that I would use. It became very accessible. I also like, when I, smoke a joint, sometimes, like, you smell like weed afterwards, and, like, sometimes it just, like, you need to take a little edge off, but you don't wanna, smell like you just smoked a joint, and so it became, like, the discretion of it. I really liked the discretion of it. Um, but yeah, also just think it's hella cute that little vape pen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Design does matter. No one's gonna say
Oh.
that it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes a brand, right?
Mm, is
It's
that?
not the logo.
Mm-mm.
Like, it's everything. It's all the pieces, and so we're talking about, this the other day, how, like, why is it that for logos, you'll wanna wear some people's logos, but you won't wanna wear someone else's, right? Like, I sort of resent the idea of, like, paying to advertise for a brand. I don't love logos, but there's some logos I'll wear, and that's because the brand represents something. It's all in the design, it's in the way it looks, but that translates to how it makes me feel and then how it supports my life. Weed's no different.
No, I think, like, there is, like, that intersection of, like, the sounds gross to say this out loud, the lifestyle brandification of vapes. Like, vapes have very much a lifestyle associated with it.
Totally.
Mhm.
I mean, is that like the jewel effect?
That's what I think is, like, I kinda was thinking that, I was like, "Oh, Juul people were very much a type of
Jewel
person."
people.
Like,
Yeah.
like, there was that brand identity there, and so I wonder
Yeah.
if that's, like, the same thing. Is that just how smoking works?
I don't know, I think there's people who like inhalables, and then there's people that don't. Yeah, I
Hmm.
don't know, it just helps my anxiety. It always has. It's like a I like them.
Going back to, some of the things that the buds are saying, though, back to the gossip, is they are actually telling us that consumers are learning, and I actually think, like, that's probably because of vapes. Like, vapes launching 2.0 has made people be able to access new things that they wouldn't have been able to before, would have been too scared to, or just had no concept of, and, like, what we're hearing straight up is that people are asking for better highs. Like, they now know what a high is, and now they want the better next thing. Like, it's kinda cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's why somebody might pay more for triple distilled vodka because the hangover the next day is not as painful. Like there's as you start to dabble into substances, you begin to understand like how something makes you feel. You like that, you don't like that. Maybe that's like that's time for a party. And that's just, like a glass of wine on the couch. And like there's different places and spaces in which you might indulge, but knowing like which product is the right product for that moment. And that's why I always say like the brand experience really starts when the consumer gets home or they get to the party or wherever the thing that they're buying the thing is for. And it's up to the bud tender to be an effective matchmaker, to be able to say like, "Oh, what are you doing? Oh, you want to experience this? Okay, well these, 3 products might work for that." Versus like, "Oh, I like this the best because this is what I can afford and my rep gave me a sample the other week and so this is what I remember." It's about teaching the bud tenders, how to sell the products and who the products are for because I think it's challenging to get somebody to buy a product once. I do. But I think it's even harder to get that person to buy that same product 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, to go into the store and ask for it by name, to leave if they don't have the thing that they want. I think that's much harder. And I think that starts with effective matchmaking on the bud tender's end, being able to qualify and then provide solutions. And then if the solution meets the need state and the consumer is satisfied by it, the likelihood is that they're going to go back. But if the solution is far too advanced for what the consumer is looking for, you set them up for a bad experience, or if it's not advanced enough and you set them up for a pure, a poor experience. And so I think all those things as the industry evolves, as, bud tenders learn more, as consumers learn more, as everybody kind of grows up together, like we have to also give ourselves grace. This is the first market in which this hypothesis has ever, come to life that we could live with free market cannabis. Like that's kind of crazy when you really think about it. And so Rome wasn't built in a day. It was worked on every day. And the market is shifting and moving and changing, and the industry players are moving with it. And so are the consumers.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I you said it and it clicked in my brain about I think sometimes when we think about matchmaking and experience in cannabis, we think the experience is just the effect of the high. But you're right, it's actually about matchmaking the total consumer experience. It's like, do you know how to use a battery? Would that be confusing for you to take home and be confused about? Like, you know what I mean? Like, actually, what is the use case for your actual experience of unpackaging it? You always say this, the experience is when you're sitting at home and it's before you smoke the weed.
It's before you smoke the weed, it's while you're smoking the weed, it's after you smoke the weed. It's like the whole kit and caboodle. So if you're somebody who went and you're looking for something that like, tastes really good and is really frosty and like all these pieces, well, the likelihood is that you're not giving somebody a $5 pre-roll and saying this is your solution. Because if they get that $5 pre-roll home and it doesn't taste great because it's below a mid, that it wasn't the right solution for the occasion. It doesn't taste good. They don't really like the high. Maybe they get too high. Maybe they don't get high enough. Like whatever the thing is. And so, it really is about satisfying the right experience um for the consumer because if they have a great experience, they're going to come back. And some things just might be too advanced.
Right. 100%. Some things are too advanced.
Yeah, I mean, and if it's too advanced, it's too advanced. So I think that's part of the reason why, to bring it all back, I think that's why the all-in-ones are so popular because it is entry level weed. It's entry level vape. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to know how the technology works. I just have to have a way of, plugging it in and making sure that it's charged and it's going to work. Um, when we come back, Sabine, we've got my friend Kate Moody with us today from Auxly. So we'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Pretty Blunt. I'm Jaime Lipowitz, and I am joined with my friend Kate Moody from Auxly. Kate, I'm so happy to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here, Jamie.
Well, you've been in this industry for like since day one, like OG in the legal cannabis space. You've seen the evolution of cannabis sales and what that looks like. And I'm curious from your perspective, what do you think it takes to be successful within the cannabis retail sales landscape?
High level, as a territory manager, as a rep, even as a brand ambassador, I think it's passion. I would say passion, motivation, work ethic, confidence is really important. I think you obviously from, you guys hear it all the time on your platform. Budtenders have pretty mixed opinions on reps walking into their stores. So I think it's really important to be that rep that the budtenders and ideally the key decision makers, the store managers, the buyers want to talk to. Be the person that people want to talk to.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like you give energy. It's an energy exchange in so many ways. And sometimes a rep walks into a store and it's like, ugh, like not again. And then another rep walks in the store and it's like thrilling and, big hugs all around. I'm so excited to see you. And there's such a clear spectrum of that, and so I think it's a lot of soft skills that make you successful in this industry, not necessarily hard skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I go back to, time in hospitality and time in retail. Prior to even getting into a sales career, which obviously preceded cannabis, but I think that it's being likable, it's having emotional intelligence, it's understanding, and really being able to read your audience, like when's an appropriate time? Can you walk into a store and just read the room and realize now's not the time? There's already 5 reps standing there. Does that store audience need another person? Come back another day. And also I think understanding, where I always say to our sales team, a really big, and I want to give kudos to someone else on my team because it's their term, but you want to fish where the fish are. Like it's really, you need to know who your audience is. I think a lot of us want to believe that products speak for themselves. But I've definitely been, I've been privy to, to experiences and situations in stores where it doesn't matter how good a brand is, it doesn't matter how good a product is. If the staff don't love it or if they don't like the rep, it's going to be really detrimental to that product on the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, but that's with everything in life,
100%.
right? Like people do business with people that they like, period. That to me is
Exactly.
like business school, like you're done. It's like 101. And
100%.
and so if they don't like you, if they don't want to support you, if you if you give them the ick when you walk into the store, like why on earth would you think they'd sell your product?
Exactly. Exactly.
But how often do you see reps walking into stores and they're not well liked?
I think it's less and less. I remember back in the very beginning, when rec legalization first happened, and I came from the medical space, so I was probably already a year into my cannabis career before rec legalization took place, and I had a pretty big role in going out and helping to onboard some commercial sales teams across the industry that had come from other industries. They'd come from beverage alcohol, they'd come from grocery, they'd come from in some cases tobacco. And I think then, this is going back, let's say, 6 years ago, I think then there was this perspective or this perception that those reps didn't have a place in cannabis. I hear the term often floating around online, the culture vultures. And I feel now that could not be further from the truth. I think that, cannabis is a product just like any other.
Mhm.
It's just like wine. It's just like tobacco. It's just like beer. It's just like grocery. It's understanding the product attributes and the reasons to believe. And if a rep can learn that and be excited about it, I don't even necessarily believe that that rep needs to consume that product to be able to properly sell it. They need to understand how it speaks to that bud tender. The bud tender then needs to also understand how that product speaks to their consumer. Because I can't tell you how many times I've stood in a store and I've watched a budtender sell a, 46% infused blunt to, let's call it a soccer mom who's walked in and said she's only ever done gummies, and isn't looking for something strong. So, I think that the reading the room is multifaceted. I think as an industry, it's reps need to properly communicate to the budtenders, and budtenders need to properly communicate to their consumers, in order for the industry to continue to evolve. I think that's really important.
Yeah, earlier in my conversation with Sabine, we talked about effective matchmaking, the bud tender effectively matchmaking the right product to the right consumer. So the soccer mom who gets the 46% infused blunt is never buying that brand again. They're never going back to that store again. Like that's a poor experience through and through because it's the wrong product for the customer and uh, that was sold by a bud tender who, wasn't listening. But it's the same. They're getting that information from the rep a lot of the time, or they're making it up on their own. And the drum I've been beating for the last little while is we have to teach bud tenders how to sell products and it's not just, highest THC or the product that they like the best. But that starts with communication from the rep, but also from the LP to be able to deliver, these marketing components so that reps can effectively pitch these products and talk about them effectively.
Absolutely. And we know we work, I would say generally on a sort of a quarterly innovation cycle, as most LPs do. We really work to, we host national sales calls for our all of our territory managers. We bring all the reps on board. We talk about the innovation. We encourage all of them who want to try products to try products. Those who don't want to try products can leverage peer information on how to sell that product. So I think it's important for sales teams to communicate amongst themselves. There's always going to be, I would call it a product expert in every category. Like you've got one rep who loves pre-rolls, you've got another rep who doesn't like infused, or a rep that only likes vapes. So no problem. It doesn't mean that they're limited in what they can sell. They just need to learn that information. So whether it's through, PK coming down from an innovation team, because often I find that, the innovation team, the group that are behind the R&D, that are behind the design and the evolution of a product, can speak to it more passionately, I think, than any other person on the team. And I think for me anyway, that's something I've lacked in my past. And something I'm really grateful for at Auxly, just for myself and for my sales team. I think it's key that the information comes down, and sometimes it's really granular details that a rep will pick up on. And then you listen to them talk about it in market. Like this is the fifth iteration of this flavor that went into this product. We did considerable R&D to really lock this in. We found the previous flavor profile was too tart. We added this to make it sweeter. Like those are things I think that can really compel even a bud tender in store. And I watch these conversations happen. It's cool when you watch a bud tender and a store manager and maybe even sometimes a group of customers, and they're just sitting and it's like a performance. They're just watching the rep and they're just like hanging on every word. I
They're
think
into
those are
the
the
sham
most
wow pitch.
they're into the sham wow pitch. And I think, I remember reading, I believe it was actually on it might have been one of your posts or something Sabine posted from High Buds Club on the feed. And it was talking about how not all bud tenders consume. So I think and not all bud tenders consume. There are some that don't consume at all. There are some that only consume certain formats,
Edibles or beverages or
right?
they don't inhale or whatever the
Exactly.
thing is.
And I think that we do a disservice by assuming that, let's just say, sampling's a prime example. You drop off a bag of flour. Well, what if not everybody in that store consumes flour? So there's got to be a story behind that product so that those bud tenders who don't consume that format can still speak to it and still understand it and still enjoy the conversation and also find the right consumer to pair with that product.
I think it's about putting a commercial spin on the nerdy cannabis things, like
Definitely.
the innovation. I think to your earlier point, you don't have to consume it to be able to sell it. In a past life, I used to sell straightening irons. And like I don't use a straightening iron, like, that's crazy, but I could sell those straightening irons because I knew how to get excited about them. I knew how to get my customer excited about them. I had a couple pieces in my pitch that I would reuse over and over and over again, and it goes back to people do business with people that they like. If you can get excited and they can feel your excitement about it, it doesn't matter if it's a hair tool, it doesn't matter if it's a blush, it doesn't matter if it's a blunt. Like, whatever that thing is, there's that transfer of energy, which usually leads to the consumer saying yes. Where I think we have some challenges in this industry is we work with psychoactives. And so if it's the wrong product for the consumer, that's where things I think can get a little hairy. You might not love the blush when you get home on your skin, but if you were looking for, a 15% THC and you got a 45% infused blunt, that's not a great experience.
Well, especially if you don't know what 15% THC means. And I think a lot of these consumers, like, they're coming in, they don't understand the value, and they're having a conversation, and a bud tender saying to them, "Well, you're looking for 20% THC. That's become the new low." But for someone who doesn't consume, that's potentially an unpleasant experience. So I think, one thing, just sort of circling back to what you were saying before, and it ties into this 46% blunt I witnessed being sold once. I think that one thing I love is watching a bud tender say, "You know what? I actually don't know much about that product, but my colleague does. 1 second." And they go and grab someone else off the floor who is the CBD expert, or is the blunt expert, or who's the vape expert, or knows a ton about live resin. And I love watching stores where there's that dynamic, because I think that those are the locations that get the best consumer experience. Because a consumer walks in and they've got, like, maybe they've got 3 bud tenders serving them, because one bud tender didn't know the answer, so they grab a colleague and say, "Hey, can you help me here?"
I actually think from a consumer lens, that's such a strong experience, because I love when somebody says, I don't actually know. Let me find out for you. I hate when I'm in a shop and I know I'm getting yesed over something, like just to get the transaction and get me out the door versus like, are you actually listening to what I'm asking for? This is the experience that I'm looking to have. In my case, it's usually like, these are the shoes I'm looking to buy, but like, and they don't have them. But like, instead of just telling me like, no, we don't have them, or like, no, that's not, we don't have that, like actually listening and either saying, here's what you were asking for, and I found you the subject matter expert, or I don't actually have that specific thing, but here's something that's comparable that will give you a similar look and feel and experience.
That's a good point. I think that I see that happen oftentimes between a like for like product and a brand a bud tender doesn't like versus a brand they do like.
Hmm.
Because I frequently, I'm in store shopping for myself, or I'm in stores, I'm out in market with the sales team, doing a work with day. And I always like to stand back and listen and watch and sort of see, the consumer interaction. Obviously, I'm there to watch the interactions between the sales team and, my sales team, for example, and, whether it's a key decision maker or a bud tender. But one thing I notice quite a bit is, I've watched it happen where a bud tender doesn't like a brand and a customer walks in. As we know, there's always that transactional consumer who walks right up to the cash and they ask for exactly what they want. They know the brand. Um, and I've watched bud tenders talk a customer out of a product and into something that they prefer. So to your point, having that buy-in from bud tenders is really, really important to your brand, because when we're talking about, an ounce of indica flower, there's a lot of indica ounces on that menu. There's probably several within the same price point. And if a bud tender is really good and really believes, they can upsell somebody from a $90 ounce to a $100 ounce quite easily.
So how do you
Um,
think you get a bud tender to believe?
I don't think it's instant. I think it's an evolution. I think one thing that we've seen happen quite a bit, and I'm sure you guys see this. There are reps that have been in the space for quite some time now, and it's interesting to watch them move to different LPs, and the loyalty follows the rep in a lot of cases. For sure, I mean, nothing, not there's no denying that product quality is important. I don't think any budtender is gonna put their badge of, their badge of approval on something that they really don't believe in, that have had complaints, they know the quality's poor, they've had a ton of returns. They're not gonna continue selling that product regardless of how much they love the brand or how much they love the rep. But interestingly, I got an email from a retailer today, just praising one of our reps out in BC, and it was awesome to see. Just saying like, I will always support you, no matter where you go. Was sort of the was kind of the sentiment, and I thought that was great. And I know this is a rep that has had jobs with other LPs in the past, has been with us for quite some time now. But it's interesting to see that like the love is probably more for her than it is for Back 40 or for Collab or for Auxly as a whole. Like the love is for this rep. And it's like, hey, I will do whatever I can to help you. And I really think that that reigns true across, that's across all LPs. It's across all reps. A
But I
lot
think
of the
that's
times
universal.
it's
Like,
universal.
that's not exclusive to this
No,
industry,
it's
is
not.
that people do business with people that they like and people they wanna work with and they wanna support, and, um, I think that is a universal truth across any industry,
Absolutely. And I think
so
as we're seeing price, as we're seeing sort of, the price compression is starting to like that's starting to change. We see inflation. Inflation is in fact is it's excuse me. Inflation is affecting cannabis the same way it's affecting everything. We're seeing flower prices increase. We're seeing things change and evolve. And I don't think that I don't really don't believe that budtenders are just trying to sell the cheapest ounce anymore. We're past that. I think that was 2 years ago, where we would see, I read a consumer insight survey once that I thought was quite interesting, and it was asking budtenders what they would most frequently recommend versus what they personally consumed. And all of them admitted that they consumed, premium or what they would consider to be craft flower, but what they always recommended was value. Well, because it's easy to sell. You've got a consumer that you assume is coming in looking for the lowest price and the highest potency. But I don't believe that that's especially when we're looking at the changes to product formats. The rise of disposable vapes would be a prime example, where a lot of them are playing in a very similar price point. So now it becomes, how do you choose?
what stands out?
You know, if
What's actually like a better mousetrap?
exactly. I mean, if I'm a customer and I'm walking into a store and there's, and oftentimes in a larger retailer, there's 20, 30 disposable vapes on the menu. Like, how do I choose?
What do you think works like, to either get a budtender's recommendation on a disposable vape or to get a customer to choose it off a menu when it's so, when there's so many options?
I think it's twofold. I think it depends on the store. So I think, and it depends on the type of consumer behavior. So if you've got the consumer that walks in, reads a menu, looks around the store, doesn't really want to engage, which we know is still like that's still a large segment of the consumer, right? So I think that that consumer can often be won by really great POS tools. They see a really great display. In my opinion, that display should house, a non-active device. I think seeing the device the same way we can look at an iPhone, in a cell phone store, you can pick it up, you could touch it, you can see how the buttons work. Maybe it's tethered. It doesn't actually, it's not operational, but you can at least feel it in your hand and get an idea of what the touch and feel is like. I think that's important. I think brands that have created tactile POS tools are really helpful for that customer that doesn't want to engage. They walk in, they see something on a display, and they're like, I want that. That looks cool. And then it's up to the budtender to say, well, we've got that in 4 flavors. Here's my favorite, or here's our top seller. I think there's also a consumer that comes in who wants to ensure that they are not maybe they've had a bad experience in the past, with faulty hardware. I think there's a consumer that wants to ensure the product they're buying isn't gonna fail. I also think there's, sometimes there's a tourist, and I think the disposable space, particularly in Canada, particularly in cities where we're so close to a border, we get a lot of like transient tourist traffic, right? You've got people that have come up for the US to go to a hockey game. They want to drop 20, $30 on a disposable. They're going to use it one night. So those are sort of factors that I think a store needs to consider. And I love seeing retail menus that have a real, like they've got a lot of diversity in terms of being able to target different consumers. In that disposable space, we know it's the fastest growing category in Canada at the moment. And I think it's important that the retailers that have picked up on that are really doing well. Um, but I think from a budtender's perspective, it's gonna be flavors they like. It's gonna be probably a device that they're used to holding and playing with in their hand. But I think the number one is gonna be returns and hardware quality. After a budtender's taken back 3 or 4 returns and dealt with several angry consumers, I think they're done. I think that they're gonna be really reluctant to continue selling that product.
I'd agree. Do you think there's a need to educate budtenders on the vape hardware, and what makes it different or better? Or is it more on the oil, the software, the effects?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, and I think it depends on what we're talking about. So, I mean, if we're talking about just, like a highly flavored, if you wanna call it sort of the candy aisle, we're talking about a highly flavored distillate vape. The input, I don't wanna say that the input isn't relevant, it absolutely is. The viscosity of the oil is gonna make a huge difference as to how that product functions. But I think that the actual hardware itself, in my opinion, is what really makes or breaks a disposable vape. A lot of them are coming now. They're deemed to be rechargeable, but some don't actually charge. Some they don't hold a charge for very long, or they clog really easily. I think creating something that is really user friendly, that doesn't require a ton of education. And when there is something that's a little bit more complicated, I think it's very important to educate budtenders to provide leave behinds that they can give to customers. Let's say, think about our collab all-in-one that has a dual heat function and preheat. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and I think it can be used incorrectly. But every time we've engaged with budtenders, we provide leave behind information cards. There's instructions on the back of the pouch. Budtenders get excited about that. It makes it easy for them to sell the product, and then they understand how to troubleshoot it if somebody walks back in 10 minutes later and says, "I can't get this to work." And the budtender's like, "Oh, let me show you a trick."
Well, it's
Problem
help them
solved.
help you.
Right.
Give them the information in a easily digestible format that they can then regurgitate back to the consumer. And the buds are interested, like they want to learn, they want the details. But very few LPs, I think, provide them effectively.
Agreed. I think that working on, it's something that we've done quite well is working on custom hardware. I think that there's a lot of LPs that are sort of jumping onto this disposable vape trend. Everybody wants to be part of it. It's understandable. But I think that at the end of the day, if we think maybe a year from now, 18 months from now, I think product hardware is going to be sort of the number one. Because if you can't get a device to work, it doesn't matter what quality of input is in it. If you can't get it to function, or if the I don't want to say the one gimmicks is not the right term, but if the functionality, like, if it's a product that allows you to switch between multiple flavors in one device, if the functionality is too difficult to operate, the product doesn't really, like, it doesn't stand up.
Hmm.
Because
Well,
if
the
a
experience
budtender
is,
can't
is
really
poor.
understand it. Exactly.
Ultimately, if the consumer has a poor experience, it doesn't matter how cool your product is. Like, if they can't consume it or they don't know how or it doesn't work for their life and their needs, like,
Mhm.
it's kind of a moot point. You can't get them to buy
Exactly.
it again.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Okay, so we know Auxly kills it in vapes. You guys are really doing an exceptional job, but you also are killing it in a lot of other categories. And I'm curious, how do you effectively communicate all of the different categories and all of the different products, um, like, as a sales engine, right? Like, there's so many products to talk about. You have a few different brands. How do you prioritize, what gets the share of voice, in communication?
For sure. And it's a great question, and with an ever evolving assortment. But I think what we've done, I think, a really great job of as of late. I would say over the last sort of 12 to 18 months is as we've we've brought innovation to market, we've also sunset products that, may have been hugely popular, but just aren't necessarily serving, or it's a category that's shrinking. So we've taken less focus off of products that aren't, categories that aren't growing, and we've put more focus into the categories that are. So, for us, obviously, vape, pre-roll, and flower are our, those are our biggest bets. And I think that in terms of really where the reps are focusing, innovation is always first, and there's always an excitement to new and like, new and shiny. The reps, it's very easy to get a rep excited about a brand new SKU and get out there and market and really promote it. But I think what we've done a really great job, and arguably, I think some of it is organic. I think we've put out, well, I know we've put out some really fantastic products, and we've gained share of mind with budtenders where, some may have, may have had different perspectives in the past, but have come to really love Back 40 and become really big advocates for us. So at that point, it becomes easy to bring new innovation into their stores. For them, it's like, "Oh, there's a new Back 40 flavor, or there's a new collab all-in-one. Amazing, I can't wait to try it." So, I do think that there are a lot of brands, not just ours. I can speak to, definitely some other brands I see out there in market. They bring a new SKU to market, and it's immediately adopted because there's brand loyalty, there's trust, whether it's in hardware or flower quality or, the burn on a pre-roll. Consumers and budtenders know that it's gonna be another win. So it's often not challenging to get that product on shelf. And it's not challenging for budtenders to be excited about a new product coming down the line. So I think pre-selling is really important. When you're an established brand and you're bringing innovation to market, it's that sort of, I would call it like 4 to 2 weeks out, you start to create that sort of like that excitement reel where it's like we've got new products coming. Every time you stop into a store, you're talking about what you've got in your assortment right now, but you're also saying, hey, by the way, I've got this and this coming in June. This and this is dropping in April. And the budtenders are like, yes, I can't wait. So it's creating that excitement, but I think you also need to have like there already needs to be some brand loyalty that needs to already exist for your innovation to be immediately adopted.
Well, with brand loyalty comes trust. And so it's, yeah, I'll try that because the last time you successfully delighted me, it was good. I enjoyed
Exactly.
it. If the last 2 1 to 5 times I've opened the bag and it has not been great,
I'm reluctant.
I'm reluctant to bring it in. I'm, reluctant to try it because, like, fool me once, shame
Yeah.
on me. Shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And so I think that we're at this stage of the industry where the, like, real players have emerged, right? Like the ones who have proven that they can grow weed at scale. They can get it in a bag. There's a quality standard that there's a group of consumers that know and like and trust. And then, you begin to really scale that and really win on the battlefield. But um that's not overnight, And so to your point, it's like the last I think back 40 on the flower side, Liquid Imagination crushes. And so then, what came after that, that Fire Breath, like, it was a very easy yes because Liquid Imagination was such a runaway hit,
Yeah.
like,
And
at
it's
scale.
100%, and we see that in the trajectory. So it took us, in the ti Fire Breath took off much faster than Liquid Imagination did. It took some time for people to trust Liquid Imagination. It had a bit of a slower build. Now it's the number one flower SKU nationally, which is so exciting. But Fire Breath just took off because people trusted it. They saw another cultivar coming from Back 40, and a lot of them were immediately, they were like, yes, yes, we'll take it. We've got another new flower SKU that's just recently come to market. And already we're seeing really massive traction in Ontario. It's set to launch in BC and Alberta as well. And I think people are already like, they're excited. They're like another Back 40 cultivar. So we've got the figured out the special sauce.
How much of that, though, do you think is attributed to brand?
Tough question. I mean, well, so, so that's a really great question. I think I think if we didn't if liquid imagination wasn't attached to back 40, I don't know that fire breath just coming out of nowhere would have had the same success as quickly as it did. Because liquid imagination was, I mean, liquid imagination, it's just a strain on its own. It just stands alone. But everybody understands that that's a back 40 product. So when we come into market on the heels of a product with that much success, the next product, gaining the initial distribution and getting the initial buy-in, like, of course, there was a possibility and there was a chance that, I've seen that happen. I've seen, a product comes to market, it's absolutely on fire. A second product launches in the same category and it completely flops because of quality or because of potency or, for a multitude of reasons. But, do I think that the velocity on, or the initial reception of fire breath, I don't think would have been as hot as it was if we hadn't had the success with liquid imagination that we did. And I think lots of LPs see that.
Do you think, though, that that trust starts at retail or that starts with consumers? Because, you had great success with liquid imagination, and then retailers were, eager to put Fire Breath on shelves, but the consumers have to buy it too. So to me, brand, like, yes, obviously brand matters to budtenders. Of course it does. It matters at retail. But to me, we build brands for consumers. And so I wonder how much of that halo effect happens on the consumer level because they had a really fantastic experience with Back 40 Liquid Imagination. It served all their purposes when they, sat down on their couch with it, when they went to that party, like whatever they bought it for, it solved that problem for them. And so you get that trust from the consumer level just because you've, successfully delivered the last time.
Right. Which 100%. Yes, we've got the retailer trust, and the retailer trust is what's going to get the product on the shelf. But the budtender trust is what's going to have that budtender stand there when someone comes in for their regular, their ounce of liquid imagination, and the budtender says to them, "We just got Back 40 just launched a new SKU. If you're into trying an indica, we've got Fire Breath. It's hot." And now that consumer's bought Fire Breath, and now maybe they're alternating weeks. Maybe one week they're buying liquid imagination, maybe one week they're buying Fire Breath, and then when the next Back 40 SKU comes out, they're looking for that. So I think that the retailer trust is necessary, and the retailer trust obviously comes from the velocity that they're seeing behind a SKU. Like, a retailer will only continue to reorder if the product does well. So when that LP or that brand launches a new SKU, they're far more likely to bring it in because they know it's successful and they know that the LP backs them up.
I sort of think of that though like wine. You have like the cultivar is the
It's the grape.
varietal. And like I know that I like the Meiomi Pinot Noir, so I'm willing to buy this other, red from that brand or whatever
Or
it
that
is
wine
because
region.
exactly, exactly. I'm less about wine region than I'm a brand girl through and through. It's like I gotta like the label. I gotta like it's gotta be cute to bring to a party, like all the things. Um but that to me is the most, transferable example, like, I'm willing to try this other thing because this thing that I already bought was successful, so they have my trust in that they can deliver a great product.
Exactly.
I'm curious, we've talked a lot on this episode about all-in-ones and, going back to Back 40, the Back 40 all-in-one crushes was the first, I would say, to me, you guys are the leaders in Canada in all-in-one, and we're the first as leaders in all-in-one. That product was such a runaway success. We talked earlier about vape hardware being like a real driver for that experience. Do you think Auxly as an LP gets a halo effect now with collab project? Because they're very different products. One is distillate, different consumer. The collab one is I don't want to say a better product. That's not the right word. A different
It's a
product,
premium
a
brand.
more premium product. Thank you, thank you.
Mhm.
But do you think you get that halo effect of like, "Oh, on this brand, we did really well and it delivers and you don't get returns, and, now here's a solution. If a customer comes in and doesn't want that distillate vape or whatever the thing is, here's something that you can also confidently recommend from our different brand." Like, do you think that plays together?
Absolutely. And I obviously being here for the launch of our back 40 vapes, and then, having to sort of follow on the heels of that, we had 3 back 40 vapes in market when we launched, the first 2 collab all-in-ones. Um, Targeted likely as a different consumer, we launched those first 2 collab as liquid diamonds. The back 40 were really flavor forward, super fruity distillate. It's a different consumer, but strangely, it became the same consumer because the same person buying a back 40 vape would now also buy a collab vape, and the same budtender would recommend the products almost sort of like if cross consumer, for example. And the back 40 definitely or sorry, the collab vape required a little bit more user knowledge. As I mentioned, it's got a preheat function, it's got dual temperature settings, but it is also designed to be an auto draw. So, realistically, you don't need to use the button function on it. But I think that bud tenders believed in the back 40 product. It was very easy for them to adopt and trust the hardware on the collab product. And I can say, in my experience, I had the same experience with the boards. So getting that product listed with the boards, they said, after we've seen the success of back 40, we haven't taken returns. The hardware's good. Yes, we'll take collab. Because, that's as I hear you talk about it quite a bit. It's such a multi-level industry in terms of the sales cycle. The LP has to sell to the board has to sell to the retailer,
Well, the
the
LPS is
LP has to sell to the
the LPS is
retailer,
sold to everyone.
so exactly. It's, there's a lot that goes into it, but, if you've got oftentimes introducing a more sophisticated, particularly in the hardware space, and I think that's where everybody gets a little bit like, more can go wrong here. And it's true. I mean, if you think about, think about cell phones, think about like the original Motorola flip phone, like what could possibly go wrong with that? And now we've got these smartphones in our pockets that have, a million apps loaded into them. The user, and I think about, like when I look at like my parents trying to use their iPhones and, I had to introduce my stepmom to AirDrop. Her mind was blown. She was like, "What is this?" I've like, "You have had an iPhone for 10 years, you never knew about AirDrop." So I think it's sort of introducing people into this more advanced technology, and we're seeing that with vape hardware.
Right, it is more advanced technology. It's quite literally technology in your pocket, right?
Exactly.
And you have to know how to use it, and that technology dictates the experience.
For sure.
So if it doesn't support what it is you need it to support, it inevitably becomes a poor brand experience, because the customer didn't get what they were looking for.
Exactly. Or you think about, I mean, even in our own experiences, like you buy something and you can't figure out how to get it to work. You're like, "Oh, I'm done with this." And if it's inexpensive enough, it just ends up in a drawer. If there's enough value, you're returning it. And either way, you're just like, okay, well, that was a poor experience. And maybe it's because you didn't have the patience to read the instructions properly, which is like, perfectly reasonable, it's a perfectly reasonable objection. Like, I want things to be simple. Every time the iOS updates on my phone, I'm annoyed. Like, now I have to learn how to find my photos again. So I think that it's similar, I think, in the hardware space in vape. People want something quick, they want something easy. If there's instructions or complicated technology, it needs to be like, 1 or 2 steps. And for the bud tender as well. If you give a bud tender too much information that they have to download to a customer, they're done. Like, I think you've lost them.
Yeah, I always think with the budtenders, you need to give them sound bites. You need to give them like easily digestible and then like sound bites that they can then regurgitate back to a customer. Um, and if you get too complicated and too complicated in it, either the bud tender doesn't resonate, they can't hear you, they don't know what you just said, or if they did resonate, the customer doesn't hear what they say because it's far too complicated, and the customer just wants to get high. Like, like a lot of them, like that's just the reality. They don't want something so complicated. They just want to get stoned.
100%. And I think we've probably all experienced that. I've watched that happen in stores where someone comes in with a simple question and 10 minutes later, the budtender is still talking. And now they're deep into the endocannabinoid system. And this customer's like their eyes are just glazed over. And often that customer's going to walk out with nothing because now they're so confused.
But that goes back to what you said earlier
Yeah.
about, like, being able to read the room, about soft skills of, yes, you have to be likable and all those things, but, like, being able to read the room and understand, can I go deep with this person because 'cause they're open to it? Or do I need to be the subject matter expert, make it easily digestible for them so it's not intimidating to get that simple yes?
Yes. Yeah.
But I would argue, Kate, that that is sales 101.
Agreed, but I think, we've done I think we've overall as an industry done a little bit of an injustice to our sales teams, and I think we're now learning, that, grabbing bringing on a bunch of and maybe they were past budtenders, maybe they've just been they're just super passionate, they're heavy consumers. They come into the space and we just assume because they love cannabis and they love our brands that they can get out there with little to no training and support and crush it. But if we're not giving them the actual, like, really core skills for sales, because at the end of the day, they're still so yes, maybe you're engaging with a budtender and you're having a great conversation and the budtender loves you and they love the brand and they're cheering for back 40. But if you're not asking for the sale, and you're not actually closing that sales cycle, then and it's maybe because they don't understand what that is, which is on us as sales leaders to start to train and start to build and start to create. For us, it's very important to ensure that our sales team has all of the tools they need and for us to remove obstacles for them. We work to provide them with like really efficient plans to get out there every week. We make sure that the sales tools are easy to access, that they're engaging. You asked before about, I know we keep going down all of these rabbit holes, which is amazing. And I think this happens every time you and I connect. But I think you asked about, how do you really focus when you've got 100 SKUs in your portfolio, let's say. The reps know what their core I mean, every sales organization has KPIs. There's metrics that sales reps are rewarded on. So we've got, there's core assortments that are priority SKUs. Every LP, I would assume, probably has a similar process. So they know what their core, let's call it 25 to 30 SKUs are. But to be, I think, really effective, you're either going in with a list of innovation. So innovation is your focus. It's like we've got this, and this dropping next week. Or outside of an innovation cycle when there's nothing new, because sometimes I think a lot of reps get lost. They're like, well, I've got nothing new to talk about. There hasn't been any innovation in 3 weeks. What do I do now? I think it's really important to do the research to understand who you can be on that retailer's shelf. If you've already got 3 ounces listed in that store, odds are you're probably not getting a fourth. So now it's time to look back and say, well, what does their pre-roll assortment look like? Or what does their 510 assortment look like? And where do I fit? In a time where online menus, internal tools, most LPs have built out really robust data systems internally where reps have that information at their fingertips. And if you don't, it's really as simple as, scraping an online menu before you walk into a store. I watch some of our best reps do that in their cars. I go out and market, we sit in the parking lot, they pull up the online menu, they go through, they make a quick list. They're like, okay, I'm going to talk about these 3 products. And they go in with a plan. They don't have these SKUs. I'm getting these SKUs listed in this store today. And sometimes they get all 3. Sometimes they get none. Sometimes they get 2. But I think it's really having a plan. And I think the best reps understand where they fit.
I agree with everything you just said, but I wanna add to it that when you go into a store with a plan of where you think you fit on the menu, it it's not about selling the store another SKU. It's, "Here's an opportunity, and I can help you increase your revenue, and here's why."
Exactly.
And so it becomes less about you as a brand, and it becomes more about, "Hey, this is missing. Here's how I help you solve your problem." And that's how you become a trusted ally, um, and then you can move around to any other store, any other LP, and they'll buy from you because they know that you're not just gonna sell them something that they don't need. You know that there's some thought put into, um, "You're missing this, and I can help support you with it."
Exactly. I mean, long gone are the days where products are out of stock. I think retailers have an abundance, if not too much choice. So how do you really, again, you need to create that personal relationship because a retailer's got a choice of, I mean, if we're talking about, if we think about Ontario and the OCS,
A million
you've
SKUs.
got a million ski, yeah, and if we're talking about disposable vapes, the other day, 14-gram flower, 214-gram flower SKUs available at the OCS. So like, create how do you create a name for yourself in that assortment? So I think that that's the relationship piece because a retailer can look at a menu, or like they can look at a board's assortment, they can shop by price, they can shop by potency, but often still there's still this gap of like, well, what do I want? What do I need? What fills my gaps? And who's my consumer? And I think that retailers have gotten a lot more sophisticated. As much as LPs are building tools, retailers are finding these tools as well. We see a lot of these platforms that are out there to support retailers with their buying. There's automated replenishment systems that some larger retailers are bringing in now. So I think it's getting harder and harder to not be good.
Absolutely. I mean, now we're at a stage where, like, that's the like, if you're not at least good, like, you're not on the field anymore. Um, I just wanna go back because I actually think that sometimes one of the most powerful things you can say is, "I have nothing to sell you today. Just here to pop in, just here to say hi. How can I support you? What do you
Exactly.
need?" And I think that often it's all about like closing the deal, making the sale, getting your numbers. And it's less about, building business relationships and how can I help you. That the reps who aren't always closing and are like genuinely curious about their retailer's business and how it's going, and they come with a smile and some donuts or whatever, that the not selling part sometimes goes a lot further than the always selling part.
100%. I couldn't agree more, and I think that, there's long sort of been this distribution. You've got to get distribution. You've got to get distribution, and you do. I mean, if you don't have distribution, then you can't sell a SKU if it's not on a shelf. But it's one thing to get the point of distribution, but if the retailer or the budtenders in the store aren't moving the product, you're not getting reorders. So as much as yes, always be closing, I also think there's an opportunity to maybe you've got a store where your products are at 70, 80% distribution. Like you've done a great job, but you want to go in to make sure maybe you don't maybe they've got everything and there's nothing new you can show them, but you can still stop in and you can build that relationship and you can stay on their radar. Because then A, they're continuing to reorder and continuing to sell the SKUs they have on shelf, but you also know that the next time an innovation drops, that's a sh it's a that's an easy point of distribution. You know that that retailer, they trust you, they trust the brands, and they're way more likely to bring that product in, sometimes without you even stopping by. I've seen that happen before, because the boards alert, like, retailers know what's coming. There's bulletins that go out from the various boards, letting retailers know what's new. I've been in situations with reps before where they've walked in and a retailer's like, "It's already on my order sheet. How's it going?" And then it's just a conversation about their fishing trip or their dog or their daughter or, whatever it happens to be. And I think that that's where the relationship building is really important. Um, I had a rep who spent the week before Christmas just dropping off donuts to every single one of her accounts. Just stopping in. I know you're busy. It's Christmas Eve. I'm just here to like drop off some donuts. Happy holidays. That's it.
Right. Right. That's it. I'm just here to help support you. Have a good
And
day. I
the
don't
store
want
was
anything
busy,
today.
they're short staffed, no one's eaten. They're like, this donut is the best thing that's happened to me today.
But that's brand. That's the brand surprise and delight, like, it's not even you're not giving away any weed. But it's I know you're hungry. I know it's tough
Everyone
out
needs a
there. This
sugar rush.
right? Like, here you go, we support you. And that's the piece that builds trust. I also find that in those relationships, when people trust each other, they open up about their challenges. And when anyone opens up about their challenges, and you from the other side get access to that, insight and that level of information, it allows you to help solve their problems. So they tell you about things that are going wrong or this or that, and it gives you the ability to come in and help. And that goes such a long way. But that's also how you build share of account, right? Like you share a store rather, to get 70, 80, 90% distribution because they felt comfortable enough to share with you, some of the things that they're working on or having difficulty with, and you get to be the hero and help.
Absolutely. And sometimes being the hero could even, I could say, "Well, why don't I come in on Saturday afternoon and I'll do a pop-up for you?"
Right,
And I'll provide some additional PK to your staff. We'll get some pizzas. We'll have a little party. Like
right.
it's sometimes it's very simple, and I don't think that it necessarily requires a ton of swag or a ton of samples. It can be literally as easy as a box of donuts.
But it's about being likable.
Hundred
First and
percent.
foremost, and being approachable, likable. Um, Nobody wants to be sold to.
Right.
101.
Yeah.
No one
You
wants to
know,
be sold to.
I think about snowstorms and bad weather, and by no means do I expect ever anyone to risk their safety and be out in the roads when the weather's really bad. But I know lots of reps who love it. They're like, you know what? No one's on the roads. This is prime time. And those stores are bored. Like it's snowing, the weather's terrible. There's no street traffic. Like those stores are a captive audience. And I think I go back to a time in Vancouver, going out and there had just been a massive snowstorm and I was out with one of our reps. And the streets were like it was like ghost town. And we walked into every store we brought bags of candy and we stood around and we chatted. And it was probably one of the most um like, insightful because everyone had time. There were no customers, there were no other reps competing. We had a great day. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head how many points of distribution that resulted in, but, it was such a valuable day. So I think sometimes like, my advice to reps is always, like, of course, don't risk your safety, but sometimes the worst days are the best days to be in market.
I just want to pick apart what you just said
Mhm.
because you mentioned this day in Vancouver and how insightful it was and, the quality of the conversations that you had. And nowhere in that did you list off the KPI of I visited 12 stores today.
No,
Or
I honestly don't even think I think we might have gotten to 4. The weather was so bad. But it was, yeah, it wasn't about, I think obviously the day was planned. So it's like, we're going to do this. We're going to go out. We're going to meet some stores. But I think during weather like that, you walk in the door and a retailer's they're so excited to see someone.
absolutely, absolutely. But I think the point I'm trying to make is you're talking about the outcome, the success of that action that, you went to 4 stores and you had an active audience and they were engaged and the quality of your conversations versus another day where a rep check marks off, I visited 4 stores, but you might have walked into that store, said, "Hi, I'm whoever," and handed a business card and walked out, and that gets check marked as a KPI. And so, sales is one profession that, in commission sales, you make it has the highest and the lowest paying profession in the world, because people can go through the motions, and make 100 calls, but that doesn't mean they're closing, however many deals to get that book of business versus somebody else might only need to make 10 phone calls to be able to get the results that they're looking for. And so to me, that also comes down to being able to read the room and actually being able to qualify this is an opportunity and I'm going to run after that opportunity and then hopefully close it versus, yeah, I had a conversation. Sure, I can put them in my funnel and like pretend it's an opportunity, but there's no way in hell that deal is closing, and that's not real.
Right, exactly. Exactly, and I think though, that's twofold though, because I mean, sales is, I think everything is an equation of numbers. I mean, the more calls you make, the more valuable calls you make, the more sales you're going to earn, right? It's a pretty
But
standard equation, but
yes, but
if
what do you
you're
chase
not
after?
exactly, if you're not making the calls to the right stores at the right time, there's a big difference between walking into a store on a Monday morning than walking in on a Friday afternoon when they're trying to receive an order and there's a lineup out the door. So, that ties back to what we started talking about at the very beginning, which is just I think it all comes down to that emotional intelligence and reading the room. It's like now's not the time. I know I've walked into a store and you see the back door open and you see boxes on and you're like, I'll come back. And oftentimes the store will look up and be like, you know what? I need a break. Come on in. Or they look at you and they're like, thank you. Like, I'll come back on Monday. Great. Their delivery was a day late, or, that I think probably some of the most, the best reps I see have everything planned. They know exactly when the delivery days are for each of their stores, and they don't ever stop in there on delivery day. But they do stop in the day after to make sure the commitments that they got are actually on shelf.
Well, their customers' business is their business.
Exactly.
That's why, right? Like, you have to know what's going on, you have to know how you can help. And if you're constantly showing up at the wrong time and you're annoying them and you're not actually delivering any value. And that's the I think the biggest component is you have to be able to deliver value. Yes, your product has to be good, of course, but you as a rep have to be able to deliver value for them to want to say yes to you, to keep you in their fold and buy your products.
For sure. I think that value sometimes also, like, a lot of that value comes in terms of sharing insights. Like, as LPs, we have access to a ton of data that retailers don't necessarily see. And I mean, obviously, I'm not suggesting that anybody share anything confidential, but, to see, peaks and valleys that we've noticed in a particular product format and giving that information to a retailer, like sometimes they're really engaged by that. Some of them don't care, but some of them they're like, okay, well, this is the quickest growing category. I'm going to load up and I'm going to go a bit heavy here. And being able to your point, I think we spoke about this just a couple minutes ago, in terms of helping them, like, how can you help them build their business? I mean, sometimes it's pretty evident. You can walk in and you can see that their assortment doesn't make sense. Like, they're spending far too many, just as an example, they've got far too many dollars invested in pre-roll and not enough invested in vape. And you just look at their menu. You've got 10 vapes listed and 30 pre-rolls. But vape's the largest growing category, at least disposable is, and they've only got 3. So there's an opportunity to say, "Hey, we've actually got some industry insights I can share with you. Did you know that there's an opportunity to increase this part of your menu? Let me also tell you how we can let's put some products on promo. Can I offer you some things to help drive some, like, let's do some prizing. Let's do a draw for your staff. There's lots of ways that you can help a retailer move through some slower moving inventory. Sometimes it's helping them get something out the door so that you can get a new listing on the shelf. There's tons of ways to be creative. And I think that those are the reps, in my opinion, that succeed. They're the ones who are always looking for creative solutions that can help their retailers, their customer first, always. These are the reps that sometimes come to us and be like, I'm doing this for this retailer. And it's like, well, we need to talk about that. They're like, no, this is my favorite retailer and I'm not taking no for an answer. I love that passion. I think that that's important. And I think that the retailers recognize that. And
Well, you
that's
know who rides for you. Like,
100%.
you know who is on your team,
Yeah. And,
always.
those are the reps that's who I get emails from retailers giving kudos to a rep. So I love to see that. I think that, I think every sales organization loves to see that when you get a nod from a retailer saying, hey, this rep is amazing. Um, it's always a good sort of, like a pat on the back. And I think for the company as well.
Yeah, for the company as well, but, you know, we always remember who went above and beyond for us. We always remember, like, who made us feel seen and appreciated and all of those things, and those are not monetary things, those are feelings, right? Like, but we do business with people that we like, and if they don't like you, like, they're not gonna feel warm and fuzzy about you, and also on the flip, if they do like you, and you can figure out how to win together as a team, they remember that.
You've also got their back. When that retailer calls you and says, hey, I've taken a bunch of returns, it happens. I've taken a bunch of returns on this specific SKU. And then the rep's in there the next day saying, okay, like, what can we do? Can we troubleshoot it? Can we figure out what the issue was? I think you can't always be asking. Sometimes you have to be giving.
Of course, it's a give and take relationship, right?
For sure.
But I think those are everything we've talked about today are soft skills. They're not hard skills, right? Like they're all soft skills. And talent, I think, is something in sales that can be cultivated. You can get better at it. You can learn how to do it with more finesse and, all of those things. But if you lack curiosity, if you lack, warmth,
Passion.
passion, um, it doesn't matter how fire your product is if people don't want to work with you.
Right. 100%.
Well, on that note, Kate, I
Hmm.
actually, last thing, we
Last
haven't
thing.
done anything like this. Give me a shameless plug. What do you want to plug now?
Easy, easy. What do I want to plug? I want to plug our frosted icicles, our new 5 by 1/2 gram. We've got 2 flavors in market right now. We've got sour cherry and iced grape.
Cool.
We've got peach lemonade coming early spring. It'll hit some markets earlier than others, and there's a lot of really cool flavors planned for the back half of the summer.
Love that.
Yeah, 5 by 1/2 gram. They're amazing. They're diamond and distillate infused, diamond coated, wicked burn. Sour cherry is my favorite. So get out there, get some sour cherry frosted icicles if you haven't gotten them yet.
Perfect. Kate, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate
Thanks for
it.
having me.
Always a pleasure. And thanks for listening to anyone who listened to this.